I read every single day of November, so that's 30 days straight. So let's talk about all the books that I read. So you see this frog here? If you think I can kind of match his face, you should go ahead and subscribe, because maybe we can turn his frown upside down. The first book that I read in November was So Thirsty by Rachel Harrison. This I read on my Kobo, and it was basically like a modern day vampire kind of story. It had a big focus about like female friendships and how friendships evolve as you kind of grow up together. But I found the friendship honestly really toxic in the book. And for me, I didn't find the characters that compelling either. Like, I really didn't care about them, and especially the side characters who were like this kind of mishmash group of vampires that are kind of involved. They didn't really have many personalities, like they weren't really fleshed out, but the book was still like oddly entertaining because you have this setting of basically these two best friends, and they end up doing this kind of like trip together that our main character's like husband had set up, and he's like a big cheater guy. And so main character, I can't remember her name at the moment, but like she's very, you know, kind of closed in, doesn't take risks and stuff because she had taken risks when she was a bit younger, and she ended up breaking her wrist, and it was like a whole thing. So her best friend, however, is the opposite, and so she takes the risks. They end up going to this place together, and then her friend ends up meeting these vampires who she doesn't know they're vampires at the moment, but like kind of convinces her friend like, hey, let's go hang out with these people. And then they go to hang out with these people who are vampires, and events ensue, and these characters end up becoming vampires, and they're trying to like navigate through the world of like what it's like to be a vampire in like a modern society, but also like what it's like to be a woman. And so I think that like the concept itself was really well done, and like the way that it's been written I thought was really good. But for me, like where it fell flat for sure was definitely like the lack of personality in our other characters. There was also some insta love that kind of happened in the book. So what kind of, I guess, it didn't mesh well with me with this book is that I love the idea. I found it really entertaining, especially like as the characters get so thirsty, hence the name of the book, and like what that means and how it kind of changes them as once as humans and now they're vampires, and like what does that new world look like for them. I think it had all the right elements, but I think it just needed a bit more time in terms of like being edited and really just fleshing out what it really wanted to be, because it had all the right pieces and at times it really worked, but then at other times it didn't work. And I really wasn't a fan of like the toxic friendship that the two girls had. And I think I ended up giving this book 3.5 stars because it was like entertaining, but I wouldn't read it again, you know? So the next book that I read was The Possession of Alba Diaz by Isabel Canis. And so this book, I really liked this one, and I still think about it, and oh, it was so well written, and it was actually the first kind of demonic possession horror book that I've ever read. So it basically follows along two characters. We have our main character, Alba, and she's basically, you know, she's supposed to get married. That's what women are supposed to do. And so she ends up kind of blackmailing her friend into being her fiance. And so together they're like, okay, we're gonna be together, that kind of stuff. And it's really because she just wants to escape. She's never had a sense of freedom before, and so it's really important to her that she kind of has some say in who she marries, and someone who won't force her to just like be so confined. And then our other character that we have is Elias, and he's just the book guy for me because he is an alchemist, and he's like scholarly, and he has like a tragic backstory, and he's also the cousin of Alba's fiance. And so this plague is basically going around, and so circumstances happen and all of these characters end up in the same area, but there's like a lot of tension between the fiance and the cousin, and then like the cousin is like, oh, there's something not right with Alba, and like he's really interested in who Alba is as a person, and Alba is slowly becoming like possessed by a demon, and that's affecting her, and nobody seems to notice except for Elias, and he's the only one who shouldn't be noticing because like this is the cousin of her fiance. And okay, the romance in this book is honestly one of the best romances that I have ever read, and it's so well done. Like the burning and the yearning and just everything about it, fantastic. And then also the whole demonic possession of the book was really well done too. The demon itself was really creepy, and I really liked the way that the story had balanced the demon aspect, the alchemy aspect, and the romance aspect. Some people may find the book a bit slow because literally the first half of it, nothing scary happens. It's a lot of build up, a lot of learning about these characters and getting to know them and their backstories and how they work and how they operate, and they're all just such well done characters. And then the rest of the book, this is where it gets a bit more in like what you would expect in a demonic horror. You get the possession, you get like the ropes tied, you get like the priest throwing like the holy water and stuff. Like you get all of that, and it was so well done. And just, I wish I could reread that. I mean, I can reread it, but it's not the same experience. If that's a book like I could forget and read again, I really, really would. I think I ended up giving the book 4.5 stars, but honestly, it's very close to 5-star range for me because I really, really liked it. The writing itself was really good. The plot twists were twisting. The romance was like out of this world. The horror was really good. The mix of like alchemy and like kind of magic and stuff, and like the long-term lore and how it's actually based on some historical events from Mexico, which I thought was cool. And then there's also the whole like colonization aspect and how like the demon is kind of like a metaphor for that, and it was just really good. So that, I think, honestly, was such a good time, and I definitely recommend that you read it if you like that kind of thing, because it was honestly just, it really slapped. So the next book that I read in November was Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConney. And this is like my least favorite book that I read in November, to be honest. And I hate when a book disappoints me, because this book has been like nominated in like best books of 2025, and it's also the book that my book club at my like new job is reading, and I'm like, okay, this is gonna be great. This was gifted to me. What a fun time. I'm so excited to read it. And the premise itself sounds really, really cool, right? And it's basically about this family in the Antarctic, and they're the only ones there right now. There's like a bunch of scientists and stuff, and they're all like basically had a bunch of seeds, so like if the world bad stuff happened, they'd be able to still use these seeds and grow stuff. And so Antarctic is where it was basically all safe. But with climate change, everything's starting to flood, it's getting too warm, and so they have to basically pack the seeds and go. And so this family, who's like the caretakers of the island, are the only ones left right now, and they're finishing up with all the packing of the seeds and stuff. And then one day, this woman, she washes up on shore, and she's like, something about this isn't right. Like, why are there no people here except for this family, and what are they hiding? And then the family obviously is like, this woman showing up out of the blue is like real suspicious, so like we need to be careful. And so the story kind of goes on where they're all hiding stuff, and they all know that they're hiding stuff, and then she ends up, you know, it's like a found family kind of aspect to the story. And that premise is amazing. Like, it sounds so good, but for me, this book just did not hit the mark, and it felt like it kind of lied to me, to be honest, especially with like the little blurb part where it talks about like the graves and stuff, like, and like the power going out, and like I feel like the book lied to me, because what you get instead is really unfulfilling, I guess. Like, it wants to be a literary fiction, and it also wants to be a mystery thriller. However, it can't decide what it actually wants to be, and so it's this weird like amalgamation of genres, and you also have it jumping between first person and third person dependent on the characters, which for me was honestly one of the biggest things that could not get me into this book. There have been some books I'm sure that I read before that worked, but for this book, when you have such a big cast of characters and they're all doing stuff, why do you only have 2 first persons, and why are 3 of them third persons? Like, it really didn't make sense to me, and I just really didn't like that. But that's not the reason that I didn't like the book. That's one of the reasons. One of the other things that I didn't like about this book is that it tried to be like a mystery thriller, but then it immediately gives you the answer, like right as you're starting to be like, oh, there's a mystery going on, but then you get the answer in the next page. Like, you're not left guessing. The characters aren't left guessing. Like, you know the answer. And it just kind of defeats the purpose, I think, for me, in what's supposed to be a mystery. Because how is it a mystery if we as the readers already know what actually happened? why don't we just follow the character and discover it when the character discovers it? Like that, I was like, ugh. And then like the whole literary fiction aspect of it, it wanted to be this kind of interesting found family with the important themes of climate change, but it also wanted to be this like murder mystery story, and like it kept on like fighting against what it wanted to be, which is like such a disappointment for me because the setting of this book is absolutely phenomenal. I think that the author has done a wonderful job in depicting the Antarctic, and the scene with the whales was really good, and like you can really taste and feel and like really feel like you're in this setting, which is great. But when it comes to the story itself, I'm like, so I ended up giving it like a low 2 stars because the setting itself is very well written, and I think that that's wonderful. And there were a few scenes, like I mentioned, the scene with the whales, that I thought were really, really good. But everything else, I was just really not impressed with this book. The next book that I read in November was We Love You, Bunny by Mona Awad. And this is the prequel sequel to Bunny, which I read earlier this year, and I really loved that book. And for the sake of not giving you any spoilers or anything, I will say that this book, some of it really, really worked well, and then some of it didn't really work well. And so the writing itself, of course, is very good. And so with it being like a prequel sequel to the Bunny, like to Bunny the book, you instead get a perspective of the bunnies, whereas the first book, you got a perspective of the character Samantha. And so it's really fun because you end up following along like different characters as they're kind of recounting their story. But of course, with it being the kind of book it is, there's a lot of parts that kind of contradict itself, and it kind of pokes fun at that when it's a different character's time to tell the story. They're like, you know, they embellished it a little bit. This is what actually happened. And another one's like, you know, that person, she embellished it a little bit. This is what actually happened. Over and over and over. So that part was really good. And then like the whole creature, Frankenstein's monster kind of aspect to it, I thought was really fun as well. And like you could tell that she was just having a wonderful time writing this book, and it really shows. Like this book was really entertaining, and I thought that it was just like such a fun time. However, it did kind of take away the magic of the first book, which is what I was really worried about with this one, because what I loved so much about the first one is that you have no idea what the actual answer is. You have no idea if what you're seeing is reality or not. And so with this one, it kind of takes away from that because it answers the unanswered questions that you didn't want answered in the first place. So that's why I kind of ended up giving it a lower rating. I think I give it 3 stars, 3.5 stars, something like that. Because although it was thoroughly entertaining, and I loved learning more about the characters and a little bit about their backstories and like what was happening during the actual events of the first book as well, it really took away a lot of the magic of what made me love Bunny in the first place. So I was like, I don't really like that part. I like not knowing. So yeah, this was a bit of like I'm still very torn when I think about this one. I think some people may really, really like it, but then some people may not like it if you're kind of expecting something else. I think for me, I would have liked it more if it actually just showed the backstories of the characters, like really be a prequel without taking away the magic of the first book, and then I think I would have given it a higher rating than I did. Next up, I ended up reading the first book in the Bridge Kingdom series by Danielle L. Jensen, and this was my favorite read of November, like hands down. This was like such a quick 5 stars for me. This book has the privilege of being on my 5-star shelf, and I devoured it, I'm not even kidding, in like 24 hours. It was that good. You may recognize the name Danielle L. Jensen from some of my other videos where I talk about A Fate Inked in Blood and A Curse Carved in Bone. That's my favorite duology that she's written, and it's one of my favorites of all time. It is just so good and so well written, and like the tension is so good. It's like peak romantasy. And so when I found out that she has a series, I was like, obviously I gotta read the series. And so this is where the Bridge Kingdom comes in. And the Bridge Kingdom is a currently at 6 books series, and it is a romantasy series. And so the first book, we're introduced to the world and the characters, and let me tell you, this story is awesome. We follow along 2 characters in this book, Laura and Aaron. And so Laura has basically been trained pretty much her entire life to be in this like super strong, super cool kind of assassin. And then Aaron, he is the kin of this other nation that's basically in charge of this bridge between nations. And so his kingdom, what I really loved about it, honestly, is like the setting, because it's very water-based as well as jungle-based. And I just thought that was really cool, because you don't really read books that have that kind of setting the entire time. It made me feel like I was like a pirate or something. It was really cool. And so there is this 15-year treaty between these two kind of like nations, where you basically give a bride and that kind of stuff. And so Laura, out of all her sisters, ends up being the person to be the bride. And her job is to basically spy to figure out how can her dad break into this nation and basically take over and take control of the bridge. And as you can imagine, she ends up actually falling for her new husband and realizes, okay, wait, I don't actually want to do this, and then stuff happens. And it is so good. The book is really fun too, because it like balances the predictability with the unpredictability, and it really hit different. And there was so many just like shocking things. The action scenes that were written in this book were fabulous. The spicy scenes were really amazing. Like the romance, the whole setting of the books. And like, I read the second book, but I finished it on December 1st, so it doesn't end up counting in the books that I read in November. But it really built off of like what was created in this one. And it is so good. Don't run to your local bookstore and read this series, because people are not hyping this up enough. I don't know why, but like, everybody needs to read this. It's so good. And last but certainly not least, the last book that I read in November is Violet Thistlewaite is Not a Villain Anymore. And this is by debut author Emily Krampholtzes. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce this name, but like Krampholtzes. And like, I bought it because I think that the cover is absolutely beautiful. And this book, when I did my book review on it, I completely agree with what I kind of talked about, that my experience with this book is not as good as I know it would have been. And that was mostly due to just like me being sick. And if you're like the type of reader that like I am, that if it takes you a really long time to get through a book because you just don't have the time to read it, it kind of ruins the value and the experience you get with the book. So my experience was very different than what I know this book could have given me, because this book was really fun. You're following along a once villain, Violet Thistlewaite, who was basically the right-hand woman to this big bad guy. And so when the big bad guy is killed, she's kind of like, what am I gonna do? She gets offered this opportunity to be good, not to be a villain anymore. And so she decides to take it, and she opens up a flower shop, but it ends up being like a half and half, because she has to share it with this apothecary who was actually, it's his family's apothecary, but he was actually an alchemist. And he's grumpy and all this stuff. He's like, why do I gotta share a place with this like random person? I don't know, she's up to something, I can just feel it. And then with Violet, like, she just wants to be better, be good, and like figure out what does good look like to somebody who's been raised for like, since she was a kid, to believe in like being bad and evil and stuff is like the proper thing to do. And her character is just like so well done, that she really just like takes the entire show. And it's like the character arc that she goes on from being a villain to being good is just like wonderfully done. And it was like really realistic, and like the way that she gets the flashbacks and has mental breakdowns about stuff, like it's just so good. And like, I imagine pretty realistic if you were a villain and now you're trying to do the opposite of what you've been raised to believe. And there's of course romance in this book. It is a found family cozy fantasy story, but honestly it has way more plot than I thought it would, because when Violet is in this kind of in this town of like Dragon's Rest, she's really just trying to find herself, and a bunch of people in that whole town, they're all trying to find themselves. But there's like this kind of like plague thing that kind of goes through, and it's destroying all the plants and stuff. And so Violet and Nathaniel, who is the apothecary / alchemist guy, end up having to team up to figure out like what's going on, because obviously with her plant magic and his like alchemy understanding, they're really the only ones in the town who can figure out how to stop this like rot. And it's really well done. There were definitely a lot of predictable aspects in this book, but it didn't ruin it for me. I felt that it was fun, it was cozy, I liked the little romance that was going on between it, and I loved just like the magic of it. It really was it really was similar to me for the experience I had reading Legends and Lattes, where you have these like this interesting setting in a fantasy world where they're just doing cozy stuff, and it's nice. I ended up giving this book 3.5 stars, I believe, but like I mentioned, like the more I think about the book, the more I reflect on the book, and I know that if I had more time to have just sit down and like read more than like a couple pages a day, then I think I would have liked this book way more than I did. So like it was like the weirdest kind of experience with a book that I knew I was gonna like it, but then like I was also thinking about another book that I wanted to read, which I ended up reading the day after this. So yeah, I think that this book is still worth the read if you like cozy fantasy. It was a good time, and I think you'd have an even better time than I did reading it. And the character development, solid. So those are all of the books that I ended up reading in the month of November, which was pretty fun. It was, again, my average of 6 books, which just seems to be consistent. Reading a lot of books is not really the goal for me. It's really just reading books that I like anyway. So like, I feel like more often than not, there's been this kind of like competition, like the more books you read, the more of a reader you are. And I don't really like that, to be honest. It's like, I read 30 books this month, but like, how many of them did you like? Like, why is it a competition? Like, I don't know. I have a whole like opinion on that matter. And so it doesn't matter how many books you read in November. Maybe you read 1, maybe you read 100 somehow, maybe you didn't read anything at all. I hope that whatever book you're currently reading, you're enjoying it and you're having a good time, because I would say for me, November wasn't the most exciting reading month for me, but I did end up reading like a book that I really, really liked. Like I found that 5-star in there, so honestly worth it for me when you find something that you just really, really love. So yeah, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. And with that, I'm going to wish you warm wishes and fish kisses, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!